Black Blood Brothers is an action-packed vampire flick that some of you may have overlooked, and when I say action-packed, I mean from the beginning of the first episode all the way up until the ending of the series. Nearly every single episode is filled with intense action, and in this first episode we're introduced to Jiro, our protagonist, who is this badass vampire. He's an old blood who carries around a silver sword just for slaying other vampires. He is using his powers to stop a bunch of bullets in midair. He's cutting bullets while they're flying at him. He's catching bullets. He's just one badass vampire, and I was just surprised from, within the first few minutes that I started watching this show, so it's definitely been a joyride for me. So in addition to all of the crazy fights that we're going to be seeing here, I also enjoyed how well they portray the vampires, because when I look at this, I feel like it was created by some people who really did their homework in order to create a solid lore for the 12-episode anime, because first of all, there are 3 different races of vampires here. First, we have the Old Bloods, which are basically the vampires who are the old nobility of the vampires. They're at least 100 years old. They have all of the strengths and all of the weaknesses. Now, when we think about traditional vampire weaknesses, most people would just go to the staples. It can't go out in the daytime, it's weak against crosses, and also garlic as well. But there's actually more than that, and this show included it, like the water weaknesses, and I was impressed that they did that, because I felt like that was a forgotten part of vampire lore that people just don't include in their movies or anime or really anything vampire related, so I was impressed when I saw that. As far as the Old Blood strengths are concerned, not only are they fast, not only are they strong, but they can also impose their will onto others, which is another vampire ability where they can just look them in the eyes. I think it's like a pheromone issue, I don't know off the top of my head, but they just look them in the eyes and they can kind of control them for a few seconds, and they also have a form of telekinesis where they can stop things in the air or lift things, and I thought that was awesome. Next, we have the New Blood vampires, who are basically like the opposites of the Old Blood, because they have a broken lineage and they don't have many of the strengths, but they also don't have many of the weaknesses. Like, they can go out in the daytime and they are not weak against water as well, but they're just not nearly as strong as the Old Bloods are. Now, both of these types of vampires can feed on humans because they need blood for sustenance, but when they drink the blood of a person, the human doesn't become a vampire. They have this special blood link with the vampire, but they're still a human. The only way that a human can become a vampire from either of these 2 races is if they were to share the blood with them personally, and that's totally optional. And this brings me to the 3rd type of vampire that we're going to be seeing in this show, which is one of the Kowloon children, that are kind of like the Old Blood vampires. They have all of the strengths and all of the weaknesses, but whenever they feed from another human, as soon as they bite them, that starts the process of making them become a vampire. The Kowloon children are easily the most dangerous out of all of the vampire races, and rightfully so, because they can feed on the humans and just exterminate them by transforming all of them into vampires in a very short period of time. So, as you would expect something like this, everyone is trying to wipe them off the face of the planet and just exterminate them all, and they go to pretty extreme measures to do this. Much of the story is set within this protected sanctuary for vampires, where it's kind of divided between the different classes of vampires, and it's very political, so it really makes you feel like there's this long history, and there's so much that you're not seeing about the world within the story. So far, everything has been pretty good. I enjoyed the action, I loved how they portrayed the vampires, and I also enjoyed the setting as well, but I feel like the weak points here are easily its story and the characters. So each episode of Black Blood Brothers follows the same formula, where they're basically showing 2 different time frames. The first few minutes of each episode shows Jiro's backstory, and all of that pieces together to show us how he got to be the way that he is in the main storyline, and the main storyline itself is basically Jiro being in very convenient places at the right times here, such as the first episode where he unknowingly was put on this boat where there's this big vampire crackdown, and that's how he got involved with this organization where he started trying to hunt down the remainder of the Kowloon children. Now, as far as the characters are concerned, I was disappointed with this the most, honestly, because they're all just so one-dimensional and bland. Even with Jiro, the only things that I felt he really had going for him was that he had a lot of history to him. I really appreciated that. He also is a badass of a character who who has really nice clothes, and that's about it. He doesn't have much of a goal. Like, the only goal that he has in the beginning of the show is something which is very vague and we don't know much about until the end, and even then it's not really that big of a deal. And aside from that, all of his goals are just situationally created, where he just coincidentally just so happens to be at the right place at the right time and just happen to be strong enough to deal with everything there because he's this badass of a nobility vampire. But I will admit sometimes he does get hurt and sometimes he does have his fight cut out for him, but it's not always the case, and he is someone who can just run up walls and cut bullets in half and just control people's minds at some point. So when you have a character that's that strong, it's hard to create a proper struggle for them. Now, as far as the other characters are concerned, I could take them or leave them. They're not even worth the time to talk about. The only interesting ones, aside from Jiro, are ones that I would have to spoil parts of the story to talk about, and it's just not worth it. But I will say that his brother is really annoying. I did not like his brother, especially with the English dub, which is how I watched this show. He kind of had some of that honey senpai going on from Ouran High School Host Club. I don't know, I just found some similarities between the characters. Now, as far as the ending is concerned, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil you, but this is a complete experience, so that's a plus. There's also this really suspenseful fight that I really enjoyed in the last episode, so that's a plus. I almost felt like it was going to be one of these to-be-continued things, because it was really suspenseful like that, and it actually worked out pretty well. But lastly, there's this minus here, which is actually that there's this ass pull of a reveal that changes the way that we see someone, and basically we know someone to be someone that they're not. And if I knew this was going to be this way from the beginning, I probably would have been face-palming myself every time this character had some dialogue, because they're only in the story because of some rule or some part of vampire lore that I've never even heard of, and it just didn't make any sense, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But as far as the presentation is concerned, beautiful animation here. This was animated so well. The fights were so enjoyable. I cannot stress that enough. If you're someone that loves any sort of action or really any sort of vampires, you need to be checking this out. And as far as the audio is concerned, the music here is really forgettable, in all honesty. I wasn't digging that opening to it. The voice acting here was really good. This was done by Funimation, so they had some star voice actors here that you're going to be familiar with, and also, you know, I watched a little bit of it with the sub, a little bit of it with the dub. For me, it's going to be dub all the way with this recommendation here, because I just don't think that the story is good enough to warrant sitting there and having to read it. So I would just recommend checking out the dub of this. But needless to say, this is a solid recommend here if you are someone who loves action flicks and will watch something just for the action. Definitely check this out. Or if you're someone who loves vampires, you should definitely check this out as well. So have you seen Black Blood Brothers? Let me know your thoughts about that in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the review, be sure to subscribe. Also, there's the Patreon as well if you'd like to support the channel. A few people on Patreon got to see this video a few days early because I'm going to try and start posting my early reviews there from now on, a few days early, maybe even a week. We'll see how early I can get to that. I'm just trying to work on these things. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.